Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to do a little bit of a follow-up to our Let's Set series. There was a lot of questions that I got down in the comments, and also some questions that were fairly reoccurring through every episode. So I figured I would just kind of do an overall video to answer those questions. But before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe. I'm dropping videos a lot, so make sure you know when those are coming out. So let's dive into it. Probably the most common comment that I got on these Let's Set series is, what holds are you using? A few of the videos kind of got up and close to the holds. A lot of them were pretty far back. If you weren't familiar with the holds, it's going to be hard to know how positive or negative they are. Ultimately, the reason why I did that is because the holds that I was using in the video didn't matter. So that is to say that there's not a universal way of saying this hold is a V4 hold, this hold is a V7 hold, this hold is a V2 hold. You can set a V4 and use sink or bucket jugs. You can set a V3 and use tiny crimpers. The grade doesn't depend on the hold type. One of the main sort of points about the Let's Set series was I was trying to keep it universal. Obviously the routes got set on this wall here, which is at a 30-degree overhang. But the characteristics of the routes that I was talking about weren't tied to 30 degrees overhang. Everything that I said about every one of those grades applies to 30 degrees, slab, vertical, 20 degrees, 45 degrees. So I was trying to make it universal. It wasn't necessarily how to set these grades. So what holds I'm using ultimately are going to depend on the movement that I'm trying to get. If it's something a little more complex, more than likely I'm going to use some decent holds where the difficulty of the route comes from the complexity of the movement, not necessarily the intensity of the holds. If I wanted to set something pretty straightforward, I call it meat and potatoes, then yeah, you can get away with setting with worse holds. It's also going to depend on the wall angle that you are setting on. Obviously, holds that I'm going to choose for a 30-degree wall for V4 is going to be a lot different than holds that I'm choosing for V4 on a slab. So yeah, the wall angle does impact which holds I'm using. The movement impacts which holds I'm using. So the idea with the Let's Set series, the reason why I didn't focus so much on specifically what holds I'm using is because the grades are not tied to the difficulty of the holds. There's a lot of other factors that are going to go into this. Speaking of wall angles, I got a few comments asking A, how steep this wall is. It's 30 degrees overhung. B, if I'm going to do the Let's Set series on a 45-degree angle wall, and C, how would it be different if I were to do it on a 45-degree wall instead of this wall? So to answer those questions, it's not different. Like I said, everything that I said in the video is universal. It doesn't necessarily have to be about a 30-degree wall. So, when I was talking about V0 needing to get everybody to the top of the wall, that applies on 30 degree, that applies on slab, that applies on 45 degrees. When I'm talking about, V4, all movement is on the table, that applies at 30 degrees. It applies at every angle. And also, like I said, one of the questions is what would be different if I was to do it on a steeper wall. I hope it didn't come across as me being short or unreceptive of the question. But I said I wouldn't do anything differently. The movement would stay the same. I would on a steeper wall, I'd probably use slightly better holds because the wall angle is steeper. So honestly, that to me is the difference between a 30-degree wall and a 45-degree wall. The movement's going to be very, very similar, but the holds on the steeper wall are going to need to be a little bit better because the wall's steeper. So for that V6 that I set with all those tiny, for me, they're tiny crimpers. If that wall was a 20-degree wall, that boulder would probably be V5 or 4, not 6. If it was a steeper wall, maybe 40, 45 degrees, that boulder would probably be V8 or so, maybe V9. So the wall angle does influence the grades. I'm going to talk about why I stopped at V7 and why I didn't think that it was going to be useful to go higher. Actually, one of the people that climbs at my gym was telling me, and they're like, hey, I've been watching your videos, and it's really funny because after the V4 video, essentially you were saying that the difference between V5 and V4 is that V5 is a little bit harder. What's the difference between V5 and V6? V6 is just a little bit harder. V6 and V7. V7 is just a little bit harder. He said, so you weren't saying anything new. You were just saying what makes it 6 is it's a little bit harder than the previous grade. Which ultimately is true. Grades are subjective. There's no universal way of saying this is V4 because it fits into this parameter. There's no formula that dictates what makes it V4 instead of V5 or V4 instead of V3. Ultimately, it comes down to, I've climbed at countless climbing gyms, I've climbed at countless outdoor crags all over the country. I went climbing over in Europe. I've traveled around and I've climbed on a lot of different things. So that is to say that the reason why something is V5 compared to V4 is because it feels like other V5s or V4s that I've done. We can try all day long to try to hone in on, well, why is this 2 instead of 3? Or why is this 3 instead of 4? But at the end of the day, a lot of it comes down to experience and climbing on those grades and getting a feel for what type of movement and difficulty that you are finding in those climbs. Now, every gym grades differently. Every outdoor area is differently. My favorite place to climb is Joe's Valley. I would argue that it has a reputation of being very soft. HP 40 horse pens tend to be a little bit more sandbagged compared to Joe's or compared to areas that I frequent more often. So it's really hard to say, a V5 at HP 40 it might feel a lot different than a V5 at Joe's. So there's not a universal way of calculating this is this grade because of X, Y, Z. Building on that, one of the things that was asked of me is how do you grade something that's sort of above your limit? How, for training purposes, it makes sense. You have a goal that is, whatever, V8, V9, but you're only climbing V6 or V7. How do you know if it's V8 or V9 so you can quantify your progression? And unfortunately, the answer is you can't. At least my answer for you is you can't. I do believe that you can't understand a grade that you have not climbed. Now you guys might disagree with me, and that's totally fine. I'd love to hear your arguments for why you disagree with me. Let me know down in the comments. But for me, just giving a crazy example, what's the difference between V14 and V15? I don't know. They both feel impossible. I can't tell you that V14, like this is V14 because of this, and this is V15 because of this. I have no idea. I will say I have tried a V14. I have tried a V15. I was equally unsuccessful at both grades. I have no idea what the difference between V14 and V15 is. There is no difference. It's all just really, really hard. But ultimately, you just don't know. And I wish I had a better answer for you. I really do. But because grading is so subjective and there are way too many factors that go into it, my honest opinion is it is impossible to put a grade on a climb that is beyond your limit. So I'm sorry this might not be the answers that you were looking for. Those are my answers to those questions. Hopefully, maybe this video might have been a little helpful for somebody. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe I upset you, and I'm sorry if that's the case. It's not my intentions. We are dropping new videos very often. It's usually every other day, at least twice a week. So if you have any ideas of what you would like me to do in the future, let me know. It seems like the How to Set series was pretty popular, so if there's any moves that you want me to set, let me know down in the comments. It might already be on the list, so we'll see. Follow me on Instagram, trying to post some stuff there, and we will see you next time.